Keanu Reeves stepped into Lumiere, the most exclusive restaurant in Beverly Hills, dressed in simple, wrinkled clothes that looked as if he'd just come from an ordinary day. Nothing flashy, nothing extravagant. Yet even in his understated presence, the glow of the grand crystal chandeliers illuminated him, as if recognizing the quiet greatness of the man beneath the modest attire. He moved with calm assurance, his steps measured, his demeanor unassuming, as he chose a discreet table near the corner, clearly preferring solitude over spectacle. But before he even had the chance to pick up the menu, an icy voice sliced through the elegant air of the restaurant. "Are you sure you can afford to be here?" she snaps, her tone laced with irony and laugh, enough for other patrons to hear what happens next. Not only leaves everyone in the restaurant stunned, but reveals a truth that changes everything. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow at 12:30 p.m., we have another special story for you. A few heads turned, intrigued by the unfolding scene. The woman who had spoken, Emily, one of Lumiere's most seasoned waitresses, stood before Keanu, her arms crossed, her perfectly tailored uniform pristine, and her expression one of blatant disapproval. The murmurs began. Patrons stole glances from behind their glasses of aged wine, some smirking, others simply waiting to see how the scene would unfold. Emily's piercing eyes raked over Keanu's appearance. Worn-out jeans, a plain shirt, and a jacket that, while comfortable, bore no trace of a designer label. This is not the kind of man who belongs here, she thought. Lumiere was more than just a restaurant. It was a symbol of status, a place where the elite gathered, not just for fine dining, but to be seen, admired, and envied. Located on one of Beverly Hills' most prestigious avenues, its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a cityscape adorned with neon lights and the slow, deliberate movements of luxury sports cars gliding through the night. Every detail inside, marble floors, velvet seating, gold-trimmed menus, whispered of extravagance and exclusivity. For Emily, working here was not just a job, it was a statement. It meant she was part of this world, brushing shoulders with celebrities, tech moguls, and the ultra-wealthy. She took immense pride in being a gatekeeper of sorts, determining who deserved to bask in Lumiere's glow and who did not. And in her eyes, Keanu did not. Keanu, however, remained unfazed. His warm smile did not falter. His eyes, kind yet knowing, met Emily's with a patience that only someone truly secure in himself could possess. "Yes," he answered simply. "This is the place." Emily's lips curled into a smirk, a half-laugh escaping her. She shook her head in disbelief. "Okay," she said, sarcasm still thick in her voice. "Just a moment. I need to check something." Without waiting for a response, she turned on her heel, heading toward the reception desk, her high heels clicking against the polished floor. The audacity! She would not be embarrassed by seating someone who had no business being here. With exaggerated flair, she pulled up the reservation system, her manicured nails tapping aggressively against the keyboard as she entered his name. Keanu Reeves. Nothing. No reservation. Just as she expected. A victorious smirk played on her lips as she straightened her posture and strutted back to the dining area, where Keanu still sat, calmly observing his surroundings. She crossed her arms, standing tall as if delivering a final, indisputable verdict. "Well, as I suspected," she announced, her voice carrying enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "you don't have a reservation." A hush fell over the room. The wealthy patrons, sipping their expensive cocktails and twirling their golden cutlery, waited for the inevitable moment when this man, this nobody in their world, would be escorted out. But Keanu did not flinch. He did not argue. And what happened next, what happened next, left everyone in the restaurant stunned and revealed a truth that changed everything. Before we continue this incredible story, tell us where you're watching from. And if this touching moment has already caught your heart, comment yes below. We'd love to know how many of you find this as powerful as we do. Keanu Reeves remained unbothered as Emily, her voice dripping with sarcasm, continued her condescending remarks. "We do have a few tables available. But just so you know, this isn't a casual dining spot, she sneered, her eyes scanning him with thinly veiled disdain. Keanu's expression didn't waver. I'd like to dine here, he replied, his voice calm and steady. Emily let out an exaggerated sigh, grabbing a menu with an abrupt motion. All right, but I'll need to seat you in a suitable area. Follow me. She turned swiftly, not even glancing back to see if he was following, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Through the grand dining room she walked, weaving between tables occupied by the city's elite. Their designer-clad figures engaged in quiet, sophisticated conversation. The golden glow of chandeliers reflected off delicate wine glasses, casting an ethereal shimmer over the meticulously set tables. Yet Emily bypassed all these, leading Keanu instead toward the farthest, least appealing corner of the restaurant, a poorly lit table near the kitchen. The muffled sounds of dishes clattering and the distant chatter of staff created an atmosphere worlds apart from the luxurious ambiance of the main dining area. Without ceremony, she dropped the menu onto the table with an audible thud. Here you go. This table is perfect for you, she said, her falsely sweet tone barely masking her condescension. If you need anything, let me know, but only if it's necessary, okay? Keanu maintained his slight smile, his expression unchanging. Thank you. I'm sure this will be an interesting experience. Emily huffed, rolling her eyes as she turned on her heel. As she walked away, she muttered under her breath, loud enough for a nearby couple to hear, "He won't last 5 minutes here. Bet he'll leave as soon as he opens the menu." Across the room, Keanu calmly opened the menu, his eyes scanning the options without haste. The live music continued to weave through the air, elegant and effortless, yet something about his posture was intriguing. He sat with an almost unnatural serenity, unfazed by the environment, the judgmental glances, or Emily's barely concealed contempt. Emily, watching from a distance with a smug smirk, waited for the inevitable moment when he would glance at the prices, turn pale, and discreetly ask for the check. Any second now, she thought. Instead, Keanu did nothing but study the menu with the same composed expression. Growing impatient, Emily returned to the table. Pulling out her notepad with an exaggerated motion, she cast him a cold, disinterested glance. "Have you decided what you'd like?" she asked, her voice flat. "Or would you like a recommendation?" The way she said it made it clear she didn't believe he could afford anything on the menu. Keanu glanced at the menu one last time before looking up. With quiet confidence, he pointed to one of the most expensive dishes. "I'd like to try this one." Emily's lips twitched as she stifled a laugh, covering her mouth with one hand as if struggling to hold back a snide comment. "Oh, of course, the filet de Rossini," she said, exaggerating the French pronunciation with mock sophistication. "A classic dish." She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice in mock concern. "Just to confirm, sir, you do know this costs $350, right?" Keanu nodded, his demeanor unchanged. "Yes, it sounds wonderful." She tilted her head, her lips curling into a malicious smile. "All right then, just to make sure there aren't any misunderstandings later, I suggest you double-check the prices. We wouldn't want anyone to have unpleasant surprises." Keanu remained unfazed, and his calmness only seemed to aggravate her further. "I'm certain," he replied evenly. Emily let out a dramatic sigh, as if she were doing him some grand favor, and jotted down the order with deliberate slowness. "Very well, as you wish, but I'll warn you, our chef prefers dishes like this to be enjoyed by those who truly appreciate fine dining. I hope it meets your expectations." Spinning on her heels, she prepared to leave, but at the last second she turned back, her smirk deepening. "Oh, and one more thing, the minimum tip expected here is 20%. Keep that in mind while you enjoy." Keanu simply nodded, offering a polite, "Of course." Emily strutted away, her confidence brimming. There was no way he would actually go through with this, she thought. He'd panic before the meal even arrived. As he waited, Keanu remained completely unaffected by the discomfort Emily tried to create. He glanced around the dining room, taking in the decor, the soft lighting, the pianist's delicate performance. If anything, he seemed to be enjoying himself. When the appetizer arrived, Emily made sure to set the plate down forcefully, causing it to slide slightly across the table. "Here's your appetizer," she said with a mocking smile. "I hope you enjoy it, or at least know what you're eating." The surrounding diners chuckled under their breath, awaiting his reaction. Keanu, however, simply picked up his fork, studied the dish with mild curiosity, and took his first bite, his expression serene, his confidence unwavering. And in that moment, the entire restaurant would soon learn a truth that would change everything. Keanu offered a polite smile, his voice steady. "Thank you." Emily leaned in slightly, her eyes gleaming with a challenge. "You know, a lot of customers who order this dish end up not liking it. It's not exactly mainstream, but I think you'll do just fine. Good luck." Keanu met her gaze with the same calm expression. "It looks excellent. Thank you for your attention." Frustrated that she couldn't provoke any reaction from him, Emily spun on her heel and strode off, muttering to a coworker under her breath. "That guy won't even make it to the main course. He's going to ask for the check as soon as he sees the bill." Meanwhile, Keanu continued eating his appetizer at a leisurely pace, unbothered. Across the dining room, Emily watched from a distance, her arms crossed. A smug smile spread across her face as she noticed him pausing between bites. "I bet he's going to ask for tap water. These types always do," she whispered to another staff member, who shifted uncomfortably, choosing to ignore her comment. However, an elderly customer at a nearby table had also been watching. With a quiet sense of amusement, he raised his wine glass and offered a silent toast in Keanu's direction. Keanu noticed, responding with a small nod and a smile. Dinner was only just beginning, but Emily's growing disdain would not go unnoticed for much longer. After taking Keanu's order, Emily decided to teach him a lesson, at least in her mind. Instead of promptly sending the request to the kitchen, she made a point of prioritizing the patrons she deemed more important. She stopped to chat with an elegant couple seated at the heart of the dining room, laughed exaggeratedly at a joke told by another guest, and even took a cocktail to a table that wasn't hers. Meanwhile, time passed. Keanu remained patient, his composure unwavering. In a further attempt to provoke him, Emily deliberately walked past his table multiple times, pretending to be busy. Every time he glanced in her direction, she would quickly avert her eyes and pick up her pace, feigning urgency. Yet despite her efforts, Keanu remained unfazed, his posture relaxed as he waited. After a long delay, one of the restaurant's patrons, who had been silently observing Emily's behavior, finally decided to intervene. The elderly gentleman with neatly combed white hair, dressed in a well-tailored navy blue suit, rose from his seat and made his way toward Keanu's table. His demeanor was warm but firm. "Good evening, young man. I hope you don't mind me interrupting, but I've noticed you've been overlooked," he said, his voice polite yet pointed. Keanu smiled back, his response as composed as ever. "Good evening. Don't worry, it's all fine." The elderly man chuckled softly, leaning in slightly. "You know, sometimes being treated like this is a test of our patience. But I can say with certainty that maintaining your composure is a great sign of strength." Before Keanu could reply, Emily suddenly materialized beside them, her expression carefully composed, though her eyes burned with irritation. "Sir, can I help you with something?" she asked the elderly man, her tone more polished than usual, though edged with quiet authority. "I wouldn't want you to disturb our customer." The elderly man narrowed his eyes slightly, though his expression remained controlled. "Don't worry, miss. I was simply greeting this gentleman here. It's rare to find someone so serene." Emily let out an exaggerated sigh and gestured toward his table. "Well, perhaps you should return to your seat and enjoy your dinner," she said, impatience creeping into her voice. Keanu merely observed the interaction, his expression calm but thoughtful. "Thank you for coming over," he said to the elderly man with a small nod. "It was a pleasure speaking with you." The gentleman returned the nod, but not before casting one last look of disapproval at Emily, who pretended not to notice. Then with quiet dignity, he returned to his table. But his intervention had done little to shift Emily's attitude. When she finally decided to bring Keanu's main course, she made sure to take longer than necessary. First, she lingered in the kitchen, chatting with the chefs, deliberately leaving the dish to sit under the warming lamp. Then she returned to the dining room, tending to other tables while entirely ignoring the ready plate. By the time she finally carried the dish out, it had been waiting far too long. With an abrupt gesture, she set the plate down in front of Keanu, the porcelain clattering slightly upon impact. "Here's your order," she announced, her tone laced with irony. "I hope you enjoy it. Oh, and if you don't like it, please let us know. We can always adjust to something more affordable." Keanu regarded her with the same steady calm that had frustrated her all evening. "It looks excellent. Thank you." Emily's lips curled into a cynical smile. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough for only him to hear. "Are you sure? It's a very sophisticated dish. It might be difficult for someone like—" Before she could finish her sentence, a voice cut through the air, and in that moment, everything changed. Before we continue this incredible story, tell us, does this moment resonate with you? If you find this story as touching as we do, comment yes below. Let's see how many of you believe kindness always wins. Keanu thanked her politely. "Thank you." Emily leaned in slightly, as if trying to provoke a reaction. "You know, a lot of customers who order this dish end up not liking it. It's not exactly mainstream, but I think you'll do just fine. Good luck." Keanu looked at her with the same calm expression as always. "It looks excellent. Thank you for your attention." Frustrated that she couldn't elicit any negative reaction from him, Emily walked away quickly. At the bar, she commented to a co-worker who was unsuccessfully trying to ignore her remarks. "He's pretending to be polite, but it's obvious he's uncomfortable," she said with a laugh, placing an empty glass on the counter. "I bet he doesn't even know what he's eating. It's always the same with these types. They come here to feel important, but end up making fools of themselves." Her co-worker forced a smile, visibly uncomfortable. "Maybe he just wants to have dinner, Emily. Maybe we should treat him like any other customer." She stared at him, incredulous. "Like any other customer? Did you see the boots he's wearing? He doesn't belong here, and frankly, if he can't handle it, he shouldn't have even walked through the door." Meanwhile, the couple who had been observing the scene earlier whispered to each other. "She's awful," the woman said, shaking her head. "He's being so polite, but she keeps trying to humiliate him." "I agree," the man frowned. "It's disgraceful. I think we should say something to the manager." Back at his table, Keanu calmly finished his main course. He glanced around, noticing the sympathetic looks of other patrons, but he didn't appear the least bit bothered. When Emily returned to clear the plate, her expression was still filled with disdain. "So how was the dish? Did it meet your expectations?" she asked with a fake smile. Keanu looked her straight in the eyes and replied, "It was excellent. Thank you. Please tell the chefs they did an impeccable job." She raised her eyebrows, surprised that she couldn't provoke any complaints or irritation. As she walked away, she muttered to herself, but loudly enough to be heard, "He might be smiling now, but let's see if he still is when the bill comes." Seated at the table, Keanu calmly observed, a slight smile on his face. His gaze suggested that the moment to act was drawing ever closer. Emily, increasingly frustrated by her inability to provoke Keanu, decided to escalate her provocations. After serving him the coffee he had requested, she deliberately spoke loudly enough for several nearby tables to hear. "You know it's hard to maintain standards when just anyone thinks they can walk in," she said to a colleague, casting a pointed glance in Keanu's direction. The colleague, visibly uncomfortable, tried to change the subject, but Emily continued. "That's why we have a reservations policy. It helps us avoid situations like this." Several patrons nearby began paying attention, some frowning, others whispering among themselves. The couple who had been following the situation looked outraged. The woman placed her hand on her chest, murmuring, "This is outrageous. She's trying to humiliate the man in public." The elderly man at another table took a sip of his wine, observing the scene with a look of disapproval. He muttered under his breath, "This has gone too far." Keanu, still seated calmly at his table, surveyed the room without a hint of irritation. His serene demeanor seemed to unsettle Emily even more, as she now felt the eyes of other patrons on her. A well-dressed woman, seated 2 tables ahead, commented to her companion, He must be someone important to stay this calm. Anyone else would have left by now. Or maybe he's just stronger than she realizes, the man replied, casting a curious glance at Keanu. Determined to provoke a reaction, Emily returned to Keanu's table to ask if he needed anything else. But her approach was anything but professional. "I hope you're enjoying your experience," she said with an exaggeratedly sarcastic smile. "After all, it's always interesting to have different kinds of people here. It adds a unique touch to the atmosphere." Keanu, fixing her with a steady gaze, finally responded, his voice calm but carrying weight. "Different? Could you explain what you mean by that?" Emily let out a short, nervous laugh, trying to maintain her composure. "Oh, don't take it the wrong way. It's just that, well, our clientele typically has a more traditional profile. It's rare to see someone with your style here." The room fell silent. Nearby diners stopped their conversations, clearly tuning into what was happening. Emily's confidence faltered for the first time, realizing too late that she had gone too far. Keanu stayed silent for a few moments, holding her gaze, his expression unreadable. Keanu's expression remained firm, yet devoid of anger. Finally, he spoke, his voice as steady as ever. "You're right. Perhaps I should handle this differently." Emily blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Before she could formulate a response, the restaurant manager appeared. He was a middle-aged man with an air of authority, his pristine suit and polished demeanor exuding professionalism. As he stepped into the scene, the room fell silent, sensing the shift in energy. The manager's sharp eyes scanned the tense atmosphere before landing on Keanu, and in an instant, his expression changed drastically. His posture stiffened, his brows lifted, and urgency overtook his features. He hurried forward, completely bypassing Emily as if she didn't exist. "Mr. Reeves," he exclaimed, his tone brimming with respect. "I wasn't aware you were visiting us today. Please let me know how I can assist you." The blood drained from Emily's face. She turned to the manager, then back to Keanu, her mouth slightly open in sheer disbelief. Her mind raced, her stomach twisted. "Mr. Reeves? He knows him? What's going on here?" Keanu met the manager's gaze with an unwavering calm, his slight smile betraying nothing but control. "Thank you," he said, his voice even. "But there's no need for a fuss. I'd simply like to have a brief conversation with your staff, if that's not a problem." The manager's face darkened with concern. He sensed something was amiss, something more than just a routine meal. "Of course, Mr. Reeves. Whatever you need." His eyes flicked to Emily, now pale and visibly unsteady. His jaw tightened. Emily, still trying to grasp the situation, stammered, I didn't know. I thought..." The manager cut her off, his voice low yet laced with iron. "Thought what, Emily?" "That this customer, who happens to be one of the owners of this restaurant, didn't deserve the same respect as anyone else?" Gas rippled through the dining room. The whispered murmurs grew louder as patrons absorbed the revelation. Emily stood frozen, her world crumbling around her. Her lips parted, but no words came. "He didn't say who he was," she blurted out weakly, scrambling for some kind of defense. "And he looked..." She stopped short, realizing any further justification would only seal her fate. Keanu's voice, calm yet resonant, cut through the thick silence. "One shouldn't have to state who they are to be treated with dignity. Frankly, it shouldn't matter. Everyone who walks through these doors, regardless of their appearance, should be welcomed with respect." The weight of his words hung in the air. The elderly man at the corner table nodded in approval, raising his wine glass in silent acknowledgement. The couple who had been watching the scene unfold exchanged satisfied glances. The woman murmured to her husband, "That's the kind of grace people should aspire to." A man at a nearby table whispered, "I knew there was something different about him, the way he carries himself. It's impossible to ignore." The manager exhaled sharply, then turned his stern gaze back to Emily. "I expect a full explanation of your behavior after your shift. For now, step away from this table. I will handle the rest." Emily's hands trembled at her sides. She opened her mouth as if to protest, but thought better of it. Without another word, she turned on her heels and hurried away, her face flushed with humiliation. Keanu inhaled deeply, then slowly rose from his seat, He surveyed the room, taking in the captivated expressions of the diners who had just witnessed the dramatic turn of events. Their eyes remained locked on him, waiting, anticipating his next words. He offered a small smile before speaking, his voice carrying just enough weight to be heard by all. "This isn't about who I am. It's about how we treat each other, whether we think someone is important or not. Kindness should never be conditional." A wave of quiet understanding washed over the room. People shifted in their seats, some nodding in agreement, others exchanging looks of reflection. The elderly man at his table gave a knowing smile. A lesson some needed to hear tonight. The murmurs grew into scattered applause, hesitant at first, but then gaining momentum. Keanu simply nodded in appreciation before turning back to the manager. "Thank you for your time. I won't take any more of it." "The pleasure is ours, sir," the manager said, his voice filled with genuine respect. As Keanu retrieved his coat and prepared to leave, the atmosphere in the restaurant had completely shifted. Conversations became softer, more introspective. Patrons stole glances at each other, some perhaps realizing their own biases, others simply moved by the quiet dignity of a man who had asked for nothing more than basic respect. And as he walked toward the door, the couple from earlier exchanged a glance. "You know," the woman mused, "I have a feeling she's not going to be working here much longer." Her husband chuckled. "I'd say that's a safe bet." Keanu stepped outside, taking in the cool night air. He had never raised his voice, never demanded recognition, yet he had left an impact that no one in that restaurant would soon forget. If you found this story touching, comment yes below. Let's spread the message of kindness and respect for all. The restaurant had fallen into an uneasy silence. The moment Keanu Reeves spoke, his voice carried both warmth and unshakable authority, commanding the attention of every person in the room. This restaurant was built on the foundation that everyone, no matter where they come from or how they look, should feel welcome. He began, his tone firm yet inviting. But tonight, that principle was forgotten. The question now is, what can we learn from this? The tension in the room was thick, but not a single person dared to interrupt. The manager standing beside him looked both uneasy and deeply admiring of how Keanu was handling the situation. Meanwhile, Emily, who had once exuded arrogance, now stood frozen, her face pale as she realized the weight of her actions. Keanu turned to the manager. "I'd like to meet with the entire staff after the dining room closes. There are some things we need to address." The manager nodded immediately. "Of course, Mr. Reeves, whatever you need. And please accept my sincerest apologies." As Keanu returned to his seat, the once tense dining room gradually began to return to normal, though quiet whispers still filled the air. Some patrons exchanged glances, impressed by his grace and poise. Others looked ashamed, realizing they should have spoken up sooner. Later that evening, after the last guest had left and the lights had dimmed, the staff gathered in the now empty Lumiere dining room. Keanu stood at the center, his presence alone enough to command respect. He surveyed the room, his gaze meeting each of theirs, not with anger, but with unwavering resolve. "We all make mistakes," he began, his voice steady. "What truly matters is what we do after those mistakes." Tonight was not just an example of poor service, it was a reflection of deeper issues, quick judgments, hidden biases, a lack of empathy. But this isn't about blame. This is about growth. He let the words linger for a moment before shifting his gaze to Emily, who sat at the back of the room. Her eyes were filled with tears, her once confident posture now slouched in shame. "Emily," he said, his tone softer but still firm, "what happened tonight was a mistake, but mistakes can be corrected. What matters now is what you choose to do next." Emily swallowed hard, finally finding her voice. I never thought about it that way before," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was so focused on the restaurant's image, on maintaining standards, that I forgot what really matters. I forgot that every person has value, no matter what they look like." She looked up at him, determination flickering in her eyes. "I promise, Mr. Reeves, I'll change." Keanu offered a small, encouraging smile. "That promise isn't to me, Emily. It's to yourself. Change doesn't happen overnight, But if you're willing to learn, to grow, I believe you can make a difference." She nodded vigorously, a mix of relief and newfound purpose washing over her. Turning his attention back to the rest of the staff, Keanu continued, "It's easy to judge someone based on appearances, their clothes, their car, where they come from. But imagine if we chose to treat everyone with kindness instead of assumptions. What happens when you decide to see beyond what's on the surface? When you choose to recognize someone's humanity before their status?" He stepped forward, placing his hands in his pockets, his voice turning more reflective. "We all carry struggles that no one else can see. The person who seems out of place might be having the worst day of their life. The one who doesn't dress the way we expect might have achieved more than we could imagine. The kindness we choose to extend, especially to those who seem undeserving, might be the gesture that changes everything." A hush fell over the room. Some staff members looked visibly moved. Others stared at the floor, lost in thought. The impact of his words was undeniable. The manager stepped forward, his expression sincere. "Mr. Reeves, your message was clear. We will work to ensure that Lumiere reflects the vision you intended. Thank you for reminding us of that." Keanu nodded, his signature serene smile returning. As he stepped out of the restaurant and onto the glowing streets of Beverly Hills, he glanced back at Lumiere's entrance, reflecting on everything that had transpired. This wasn't just about a restaurant. It wasn't just about a single act of mistreatment. It was about something much larger: the power of kindness, the importance of seeing people for who they are rather than what they appear to be, and the ability to turn any situation into a moment of growth and transformation. As he walked down the street, the city lights shimmering around him, Keanu thought about the message he hoped others would take from that night. If he could leave them with just one thought, it would be this: in a world where you can be anything, choose to be kind. True strength is not found in judgment, but in acceptance. And most importantly, it's in the small choices we make every day that we shape not only the world around us, but who we are as human beings. We all encounter moments where we are quick to judge others, often without realizing it. But imagine what could change if, instead of making assumptions, we extended kindness. The truth is, you never know what someone is going through. A small gesture, a smile, a kind word, a moment of patience can make a difference far greater than you realize. Try this in your daily life. The next time you find yourself making a snap judgment, pause. Ask yourself, what if there's more to this person's story than I can see? Choose to treat them with kindness anyway. It costs nothing, but its impact is priceless. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. And if this story touched your heart, drop a yes in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. See you in the next video. Have a wonderful day.